Shanice once believed that, if she stayed silent a little longer, everything would eventually settle on its own, that time would do what confrontation could not. But the more she swallowed her words, the more she felt an invisible hand tightening around her life, not in the blunt way of ordinary jealousy, but with the precision of something planned. She began retracing the harmless details she used to dismiss. The way Ted's attitude shifted to abruptly, as if someone had quietly handed him a new script for how to look at her. The dates that were cancelled at the last minute, not like random bad timing, but like deliberate interruptions, designed to keep her waiting, doubting, apologizing. The rumors that spread with terrifying speed, not as idle gossip, but as shared certainty, as if the community had been primed to accept them before they were even spoken aloud. And when the fragments finally locked together, the truth revealed itself in the cruelest form. Leslie hadn't simply slipped between Shanice and Ted. Leslie had built an entire filthy stage to turn Shanice into the suspicious one, Ted into the easily guided one, and herself into the perfect victim in everyone's eyes. What enraged Shanice most wasn't that Leslie wanted Ted. It was that Leslie wanted to strip Shanice of the right to be believed, the right to be seen as decent, the right to defend herself without being cast as the aggressor. Her anger didn't explode into noise. It thickened inside her, turning into something colder, heavier, more dangerous, because she understood that one wrong move would make her look exactly like the villain Leslie had already described to the world. That was the moment Shanice stopped trying to handle it the mature way. If she kept playing polite, she would be slowly erased by the very civility Leslie was exploiting. So she chose a harsher path, one that didn't rely on feelings, but on proof. She aimed straight at Leslie's blind spot, the one thing Leslie believed no one could see and no one would dare touch. People who build stages like this always have a foundation, money, power, or a secret so toxic it scares others into silence. Shanice began collecting evidence in the shadows, not to complain, but to expose structure, something solid enough to collapse the whole performance in a single strike. A suspicious transfer of money that lined up too neatly with the timing of a rumor. A series of edited photos crafted to look convincing to outsiders, but designed with just enough manipulation that a trained eye could detect. The scenes, secret meetings staged like emotional traps, always arranged when Ted was most vulnerable, when he was craving reassurance, and Leslie could step in wearing a costume of empathy. And the deeper Shanice dug, the more she realized this wasn't only about stealing a man. Someone had turned love into a weapon, an instrument meant to control Ted's reputation, his choices, his future, as if Ted were a valuable piece in a much larger game. That revelation shifted Shanice's anger into something sharper than fury, dread, because if Ted was the target, then Shanice wasn't just a rival. She was an obstacle the script demanded be removed. Yet just as Shanice drew close to her moment of truth, another fear rose, more practical and more devastating than anything Leslie had done. Ted's reaction. Shanice knew Ted long enough to recognize the quiet hunger inside him to be seen a certain way, the desperate need to protect his image even when the cost was emotional honesty. If Ted learned he'd been manipulated, he might finally turn toward Shanice, burn with righteous rage, and drag Leslie down as the fraud she was. But he might do something far worse. He might bury everything. He might choose silence, not because he wanted Leslie, but because he couldn't bear the humiliation of admitting he'd been played, couldn't bear the possibility that the world would laugh at him. Shanice felt trapped in a brutal paradox. She was fighting to save her love, but winning could destroy it if Ted decided that protecting his public face mattered more than owning the truth. In that moment, she understood this was no longer a simple battle between two women. It was a war between truth and social power, between being loved and being believed, between a woman reclaiming her dignity and a man whose worst instincts might surface the instant his pride was threatened. Then, right when Shanice thought she had control, something changed. A strange pattern emerged, subtle, but too consistent to ignore. She felt watched, not like paranoia, but like repeated coincidences that started to feel like evidence in their own right, familiar shapes lingering where they didn't belong. eyes that looked away too quickly, as if someone was measuring her progress, monitoring her hunt. It was as if someone knew what she was gathering before she even fully understood the scope of the game she'd stepped into, and her anger transformed again from anger at Leslie to anger at whatever system protected Leslie, or at an unseen figure feeding Leslie the power to turn rumor into verdict. If there was a third player, then Leslie was only the front and actress playing victim to win sympathy, while the real puppeteer decided who would be ruined. And if that puppeteer had ties to Ted's world, Shanice wasn't only fighting Leslie anymore, she was fighting the entire ecosystem. Ted belonged to a world that could crush her simply for touching what everyone else agreed should remain buried. The Cold War between Shanice and Leslie shifted into a darker phase, quiet, ruthless, suffocating. Leslie kept polishing her victim mask, and the softer she appeared, the more people believed her innocence. That softness was its own kind of violence. Meanwhile, Shanice was forced into calculation, because any mistake would turn her evidence into a double-edged blade. If she exposed it too early, she would be dismissed as a jealous woman hunting for revenge. If she waited too long, Leslie would flip the board again, layering a new performance on top of the old, until Shanice became the liar. Shanice found herself cornered by choices she never wanted: protect her principles or protect her love, protect Ted's name or protect her own reality. She felt as if she was standing before a door that could never be closed once opened. One path led to freedom under harsh light, the other led to survival in shadow, and the most frightening possibility wasn't only what Leslie or Ted might do, it was what Shanice herself might become under pressure. How far she might go, what line she might cross, simply because she could no longer endure being turned into a joke one more time. But what if everything had been planted? What if the evidence Shanice gathered was real, yet arranged in a way meant to push her toward the wrong conclusion, so that when she finally struck, she would hit the wrong target and destroy herself? What if Leslie's blind spot wasn't something Leslie hid, but something someone else hid behind her, giving her the confidence of a woman who believes she's untouchable? And what if Ted wasn't only a manipulated victim, but also a silent accomplice, not because he wanted Shanice harmed, but because he feared the scandal the truth would unleash, feared that it would ruin the future he had fought to protect? Was Leslie tearing Shanice apart purely out of jealousy, or because Ted was the key to a larger plan, one that could elevate Leslie into a position who none saw coming, who had the power to turn a rumor into a social fact within hours? And what did they want from Ted badly enough to weaponize love itself? Was the sense of being watched a threat meant to stop Shanice, or a strange kind of protection from something even more terrifying waiting at the next step? And most of all, if Shanice must choose expose the truth and destroy Leslie, or stay silent to save Ted from scandal, will she choose what is right, or what is necessary? And if she chooses right, could that be the decision that costs her Ted forever?